She knocked on my door to complain about the noise, but 5 minutes later, she was sitting on my couch, telling me things she hadn't told anyone in years. I was halfway through rewriting the same paragraph for the fourth time when the knock hit my door, sharp, precise, and unmistakably annoyed. The kind of knock that stops your thoughts mid-sentence. I froze, staring at the door like it had suddenly grown teeth. I knew I'd been pacing too much, dragging my chair, tapping my pen against the wall. But I'd been so lost in my work I didn't realize how loud it must have sounded. When I opened the door, she was standing there, a woman around 42, maybe 45, hair slightly messy like she'd just run her hand through it in frustration, wearing a soft sweater and fitted jeans that said she was comfortable at home before this. Her expression was calm but firm, like she wasn't angry, just tired of holding it in. "Hi," she said, crossing her arms. "I don't want to be that neighbor, but there's a lot of noise coming from here tonight." Her voice surprised me. It wasn't sharp. It wasn't cold. It had this low, steady warmth to it, like she was trying to stay patient. She looked at me as though she was studying what sort of person she was about to deal with. I apologized immediately, stumbling over my words, but she didn't interrupt. She just watched me with those sharp, intelligent eyes that made me very aware of myself. Then her expression shifted, just slightly, when she realized I was genuinely flustered. Her shoulders softened. "What are you even doing in here?" she asked, but not accusingly. More curious. I explained I was working on something for school, something I kept overthinking. She raised an eyebrow. "At this hour?" And then she stepped a little closer, peeking inside my apartment before I could answer. Not nosy, just openly curious in a way that felt strangely disarming. She lifted her chin, as if deciding something, and said, "You know what? Let me see." And before I could process what was happening, she gently brushed past me, inviting herself in with the kind of confidence only a grown, self-assured woman carries. I stepped aside instinctively. She didn't wait for permission, but surprisingly, it didn't feel rude. It felt natural, like we both silently agreed the door being open meant the room was open too. The scent of her perfume drifted past me, light, mature, almost calming. She stood in the middle of my living room, hands on her hips, looking around like she was trying to figure out who I was based on my furniture and clutter. "Ah," she said, spotting the notebook on the table. "So that's what's keeping you awake." I told her I didn't realize how much noise I'd made. She glanced over her shoulder at me, and her irritation melted into something almost amused. "You looked so guilty when you opened the door," she said softly. "I had to come see what kind of trouble you were up to." For a moment, neither of us moved. She was close enough that the distance felt intentional. My arm brushed hers when I reached to close the door, and she didn't flinch or step away. The knock that started as a complaint suddenly felt like the beginning of something neither of us had planned. She wandered deeper into my apartment the way someone does when they're not sure if they should stay, but also not in a hurry to leave. Her fingers trailed lightly across the back of my couch, then along the edge of my bookshelf, as if she were reading the story of my life through the things I owned. There was no judgment in her eyes, only curiosity and a quiet, unexpected ease. "You live pretty simply," she said, glancing over at me with a half-smile. "Is that a polite way of saying I need more furniture?" I replied. She laughed, soft, warm, the kind of laugh that fills a room without trying. "No, just, I can tell you're here to work, not to decorate." She settled onto the couch like she belonged there, crossing one leg over the other. Then, with a tiny pat on the cushion beside her, subtle, but undeniably inviting, she said, "Sit. I want to understand what all this noise was about." I sat, maybe a little too close, but she didn't move away. Our knees touched for a moment, just a light brush, but I felt it in my chest before my skin even registered it. She picked up my notebook from the coffee table. "You're writing?" she asked, flipping gently through the pages. "I'm trying," I admitted. "It's more pacing and stressing than actual writing." Her eyes scanned a few lines before she looked up at me with this small, impressed smile. "This is good. You think too much, but the heart's there." I didn't know how someone could read a single paragraph and understand me more than most people did in hours, but somehow she did. Then she leaned back into the couch, pulling the throw blanket over her lap. A simple gesture, but it shifted the energy, made the room feel warmer, smaller, more intimate. The lamplight cast a soft glow on her face, highlighting the gentle strength in her features. "So," she said quietly, "why are you working so late? What are you chasing?" It was a real question, not small talk, not filler. A question from someone who genuinely wanted to see the parts of me most people overlooked. I told her about expectations, my own, my family's, the invisible ones I'd hung on my shoulders. I told her how sometimes I felt like I was racing against everyone my age, even when I wasn't sure what the finish line was. She listened, really listened, not the polite nodding most people do. Her eyes stayed on mine, steady and soft, occasionally narrowing in thought or widening with empathy. She tucked her hair behind her ear as I spoke, an unconscious gesture, but one that made her look almost shy for a moment. When I finished, she let a silence settle between us, not uncomfortable, but grounding. "You're carrying too much," she said eventually, her voice low. "You're young, but you already sound worn out." Her words weren't criticism, they were concern. Unexpected, gentle concern from a woman who barely knew me. "Life gets loud," she added, almost to herself. "And sometimes you don't notice how loud you've become until someone knocks." Her gaze drifted around the room again, softer this time. "I didn't expect to stay this long," she admitted. "But it feels surprisingly easy to talk to you." Her knee brushed mine again, and this time, neither of us moved. For a while, we talked like old friends who'd accidentally forgotten we'd only just met. The room felt softer, the air calmer, as if the world outside had gone quiet just to let us speak. She sat angled toward me now, one knee touching my leg lightly, her arm draped across the back of the couch. Every few minutes, she'd let her fingers graze the fabric near my shoulder, a casual movement, but one that pulled my attention every time. At one point, she stopped flipping through my notes and just looked around. Her eyes landed on the plant in the corner, drooping dramatically. "You know," she said, "that thing is holding on for dear life." I laughed. "Yeah, I'm not great at keeping things alive." She smirked at me, playful. "Not a good sign. You're supposed to be young and energetic. That plant has given up on you." But her tone softened as she said it. Teasing me seemed to make her more relaxed, like she was slipping out of neighbor mode and into something closer to companionship. She shifted on the couch and pulled her legs beneath her, settling into a comfortable curl that brought her even closer. When she leaned to set the notebook down, her shoulder brushed my chest. Light. Accidental. But she didn't apologize or pull away. She just let the moment sit, as though acknowledging it silently. Then her humor faded, and something quietly honest took its place. She looked down at her hands, thumbs circling slowly over each other. "Truth is, I don't usually do this." I kept my voice gentle. "Do what?" "Knock on neighbors' doors. Invite myself in. Sit here, talking like I've known someone for years." A tiny laugh escaped her, but it wasn't amused. It was self-aware, almost hesitant. "I'm not that woman. Or at least, I didn't think I was." I waited, sensing there was more. She inhaled slowly, her eyes lifting just enough to meet mine before drifting away again. "I've had a strange few months. Everything feels predictable. Quiet. Too quiet. I come home, make dinner, watch the same shows, wash the same dishes, go to bed. Repeat." She shook her head. "And I used to like quiet. But lately, it's starting to feel like I'm disappearing inside it." I felt something in my chest tighten for her, an ache I didn't expect. She pressed her palms against her thighs, exhaling. "When I heard your noise tonight, I was annoyed. But," she paused, searching for the right words. I realized it was the first time in days I felt anything other than autopilot. The honesty in her voice made the room feel suddenly smaller, warmer. I could see the hesitation in her eyes, the vulnerability she didn't usually show people. She looked at me as if waiting to see if I'd judge her for admitting loneliness. I didn't. "You don't seem like someone who's disappearing," I said softly. That made her look at me fully, really look. Her expression softened into something both grateful and fragile. "That's kind of you," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Her hand drifted toward mine, not touching, just close enough that my skin felt the heat of her presence. Maybe I just needed someone to say it. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't heavy. It was connecting. Something in the air shifted then. Not dramatic, not loud, just a quiet acknowledgement that there was more between us than a noise complaint in a late-night conversation. It was the first moment that felt like the beginning of something neither of us had meant to reveal. Time slipped by without either of us noticing. The lamp threw soft amber light across her face, warming the shadows beneath her eyes and giving her expression a gentleness she might not show during the day. At some point, the room had shifted from a place she stepped into out of annoyance to a space she was settling into like she belonged there. She checked her phone. The screen glow lit her features for a second. Then she sighed. "I should go," she murmured. But her voice didn't hold conviction. More like she was repeating a rule she'd always followed. She hesitated, thumb hovering over her screen. "It's been a long time since I've talked to someone this much." She smiled, small and almost embarrassed. Or this easily. That vulnerability, the softness in her tone, stirred something in me. I wasn't sure what made me bolder, the warmth in her voice, or the way she kept glancing at the door but never moving toward it. "You can stay a little longer," I said quietly, and immediately added, "only if you want to." Her eyes lifted to mine with a look I hadn't seen from her all night, a surprised, sincere kind of tenderness. Slowly, she set her phone down. "I do want to," she admitted, the words faint but full of meaning. Her posture changed subtly after that. She shifted closer, the cushion between us disappearing as naturally as a breath. Our shoulders touched, lightly, but she didn't pull back. If anything, she adjusted so the contact felt intentional. "So," she said, tilting her head, "tell me something you don't usually tell people." I told her about feeling behind in life, about the pressure to prove myself even when no one was asking. She listened, eyes steady, lips softened, head tilted in a way that made her look both compassionate and strong. The kind of presence you lean toward without realizing it. And when I finished, she placed her hand gently on my forearm. Not flirtatious, not dramatic, just a warm, grounding touch. "You don't have to have everything figured out yet," she said softly. "You're allowed to be young." Her thumb brushed lightly across my skin before she withdrew her hand, slow enough to leave the impression lingering. I offered to make tea, mostly because I needed a second to breathe. She followed me to the kitchen anyway, arms crossed loosely, watching me with a relaxed ease that felt intimate in its own way. When I passed her a mug, our fingers touched, just the briefest overlap, but the spark of contact was enough to make both of us pause. She smiled down at the cup. "Thank you." But the word felt like it carried more weight, like the gratitude was for the moment rather than the drink. Back in the living room, she pulled the blanket over both our legs this time. The distance between us was gone. Completely. "You know," she said, looking ahead but speaking to me. "I didn't expect to feel comfortable tonight." Then she turned slightly, her shoulder pressing softly into mine, a quiet closeness that felt like an invitation and a confession all at once. "And yet, here I am," she whispered. The night had stopped being about noise long ago. Now it was about the quiet we were sharing together. The tea had long gone lukewarm, forgotten on the coffee table. Neither of us reached for it anymore. The real warmth in the room wasn't coming from the mugs. It was coming from the nearness between us, this gentle, steady closeness that had formed without either of us announcing it. She sat curled into the corner of the couch, legs tucked beneath her, her shoulder resting lightly against my upper arm. Every time she shifted, even the smallest adjustment, I felt it like a quiet spark. Not overwhelming, not rushed, just present. The kind of awareness that builds slow and steady until it settles in the chest. Her hair fell a little toward her face, and when she brushed it back, the movement was so soft and feminine it made my breath catch without warning. She didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she did and pretended she didn't. At some point, she reached for the throw blanket again, adjusting it over her lap. As she did, her hand slid across mine, just a natural, unthinking motion. But the moment her skin touched mine, both our movements froze. Her hand rested lightly on top of mine, fingertips grazing the back of my knuckles. Neither of us pulled away. Neither of us said a word. She let out a tiny breath, not shaky, but surprised. Almost like she hadn't meant for the touch to linger, but also didn't mind that it did. Her eyes lifted to mine, and for a heartbeat the room felt suspended, like even the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen went quiet. "I'm sorry," she whispered, but the apology didn't sound real. More like something she felt she was supposed to say. "You don't have to be," I said softly. She studied my face in that unhurried, thoughtful way she had, taking in details slowly, almost cautiously, like she was checking whether she was imagining the connection or if it was truly mutual. Her gaze dropped to my mouth, so quickly I might have missed it if I weren't already paying attention to everything about her. Then she smiled, small, warm, a little breathless. "You really are easy to be around," she said, her voice low and sincere. I didn't expect that. Her hand was still resting on mine. She seemed to realize it only when her thumb moved slightly, brushing my skin. A small gesture, but meaningful. Intentional. Brave, even. "I usually keep to myself," she admitted. "I don't get moments like this. Not lately." I turned my hand just enough that our fingers aligned. Not holding, not gripping, just fitting together naturally. Her lips parted slightly, as if she felt the shift all the way through her. "I like your company," I murmured. "More than I probably should after just one night." She laughed quietly at that, a soft, intimate sound that filled the space between us. "Well, then we're both breaking rules tonight," she said. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, charged with everything neither of us had the courage to say yet. Her breathing grew slower, steadier, and she leaned her head just a little closer to my shoulder, her temple nearly touching me. Not quite, but almost. And somehow, that almost carried more tension than any touch could. For a moment, we simply existed like that, close, warm, aware of each other in a way that felt both safe and undeniably magnetic. The night had reached a point where nothing dramatic needed to happen. The tension wasn't in what we did. It was in what we both knew we could do. If we chose to close that last inch between us, the longer we sat there, the more the room felt suspended between breaths. The blanket pulled around our legs. The lamp cast a soft halo of light, and her presence beside me felt steady, warm, and deeply human. There was no rush for either of us to speak, but silence has a way of revealing things you didn't realize you were holding inside. She shifted slightly, just a small movement to straighten her posture, but I felt the moment she pulled herself back into awareness. Her eyes lifted from our hands to my face, and something in her expression had changed. Not distant, more cautious. "I should probably say this," she began softly, her voice slower than before, as if she were choosing each word with care. "If I've been forward tonight, I'm sorry." The apology was gentle, but it carried a fragile edge, like she feared she'd misread the entire evening. "You're not," I said quickly, but quietly, not wanting to overwhelm her. She looked down at her lap, smoothing the blanket with her fingers. "It's just, I'm not used to this." A tiny breath escaped her, half laugh, half confession. Moments like this. Feeling comfortable. Letting myself feel comfortable. Her honesty settled between us like soft dust, delicate and real. I turned slightly toward her. "You don't need to apologize for being yourself." She swallowed, eyes flickering upward. The lamplight caught the faint worry in them. "I guess I'm afraid I'll come across as someone trying to fill a void. Or someone who doesn't understand boundaries." "You haven't crossed any," I said, and I meant it. "If anything, I've been afraid I'm the one reading too much into tonight." A soft, surprised smile tugged at her lips, like I'd cracked something open she didn't expect to share. "You're not," she whispered. Her hand, still close to mine, tensed just slightly, then relaxed. She didn't pull it away. Instead, she let it drift until her fingers brushed my knuckles again. This time the touch was unmistakably intentional. Her voice dropped even softer. "I didn't plan to tell you half the things I have tonight." She exhaled and leaned back, as if letting the vulnerability settle. "I don't usually let people see this side of me. Not anymore." Her words weren't sad. They were sincere. A truth she'd kept tucked behind years of composure. "What side?" I asked gently. She looked at me, not guarded, not composed, but fully open. "The side that still wants connection. That still wants to be seen." That struck something deep in me, something protective and tender. "You deserve to be seen," I said, "by someone who actually pays attention, not just in passing." A breath caught in her throat, and in that quiet moment, she rested her hand on mine fully, soft, steady, warm. "Do you think," she began, then paused, searching my eyes with a mix of hope and fear. "Do you think this is a bad idea? Us talking like this? Letting this happen?" Her voice didn't waver. It wasn't uncertainty, it was honesty. A woman who had lived long enough to know the consequences of ignoring her instincts. I held her gaze. "It doesn't feel wrong," I said. "It feels rare." Her shoulders relaxed, the tension melting from them slowly. Then, with a fragile courage that made my chest tighten, She nodded. Rare, she repeated softly. I like that word. She laced her fingers with mine, gently, hesitantly, then fully. And in that small, deliberate motion, we both acknowledged what the night had quietly been building toward. A connection neither of us planned, but both of us were choosing. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The room felt suspended, like even the clock on the wall forgot to tick. She stood there in front of me, her arms loosely folded, her breathing unsteady, her eyes searching my face as if she was trying to memorize something she wasn't sure she was allowed to keep. I didn't move toward her. I didn't reach for her. I didn't give her any reason to feel cornered or rushed. I just let her be, because that was the one thing she had hinted about all night, even if she never said it plainly. Nobody in her life really let her just exist without expectations, roles, or the pressure to act a certain way. She let out a breath, slower, softer, almost shaky, then glanced at my hand resting on the counter. It was such a small thing, but you could see the entire war going on inside her. Wanting connection, terrified of misreading the moment, terrified of trusting herself. Then she whispered something I wasn't expecting at all. I didn't come here tonight just because of the noise. My chest tightened, not with shock, but with recognition. I had felt it hours ago, in the way she lingered, the way her frustration softened, the way she let her guard slip every time she felt safe for even a second. But hearing her admit it, that was different. She rubbed her palm over her arm. I was having one of those evenings where everything feels heavier than it should. And your music was loud, yes, but it wasn't the noise that bothered me. It was being alone with my own thoughts. She looked down, then added quietly, I didn't want to be alone. There it was, the truth she had been circling all night. Not desire, not loneliness. The simple human need to feel less invisible. I stepped closer, slow enough that she could stop me if she wanted. You're not alone now, I said gently. She looked up at me like those were the exact words she had been waiting for. Her shoulders loosened, her expression softened, and something in her stood down, like she finally stopped fighting herself. She took one small step forward, barely anything, barely a shift in space, but it felt like the emotional equivalent of crossing an ocean. Thank you, she whispered, for not making this complicated. It doesn't have to be, I said. She exhaled again, and this time it sounded like relief. Real relief. And she reached out, not for my arm, not for my hand, but for the fabric of my t-shirt, lightly pinching it between her fingers. A tiny gesture, subtle, careful, but also the most honest thing she'd done all night. I feel good here, she murmured, and I haven't felt good around someone in a long time. I nodded once slow. Then stay, as long as you want. Her lips curled into the first real smile she'd let herself show. Warm, nervous, a little disbelieving. And that was the moment, right there, when she finally let herself want something without apologizing for it. If this story of unexpected connection and quiet romance touched you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a slow burn love story that tugs at the heart.